Okay, welcome back to week 2 of Americana, Cultural Phenomena in Contemporary American Society. And we're going to talk a little bit about Marilyn Monroe, our biographical reading for the week. So this is from the Nonfiction Zone. 18 Fantastic Facts About Marilyn Monroe by Michael Allen. And there's no denying that Marilyn Monroe is a legend. She is a sex symbol from times past who is still revered today. She was fascinating, intriguing, very complicated woman. She didn't come from the greatest of backgrounds, so it's amazing to know that she rose to such fame. All the facts were jotted down while reading Legend, The Life and Death of Marilyn Monroe by Fred Lawrence Giles. I hope that you enjoy reading these facts as much as I have enjoyed learning about this complex woman. If you are a fan of Marilyn, you probably already are aware of the first one, but as a person new to her life story, I was surprised by it. So she was born Norma Jean Mortensen. Her father was absent throughout most of her life. Her grandmother was committed to a hospital for mental problems, and her mother also suffered mental disabilities as well. And this haunted Marilyn throughout her life. She was always concerned that she might end up like her grandmother or her mother. She stuttered at times throughout her life. She was sent to an orphanage when she was 9 years old because of her mother's disabilities. She married at age 16, her first marriage to Jim Doherty, and that marriage only lasted 4 years. So she gets into acting, and she goes to like an advisor that helps her develop her acting persona. And he suggested a name change. And he said, you look like a Marilyn. So we'll start off with that. She said, well, how about my grandmother's name, Monroe? Can I use that? And Marilyn Monroe, that was her new acting persona and name, stage name. She starred in musicals in New York as well. She did have minor plastic surgery on her nose and chin. She attempted suicide several times in her life. She was notorious for being late. Directors would sometimes have to shoot off schedule to accommodate her lateness. Sometimes when she was shooting, she wanted to reshoot the same scenes over and over and over again, much to the dismay of her co-stars. She was actually fired from her last movie because of her erratic behavior. She had a strong desire to be taken more seriously as an actress, and she had acting coaches throughout her career to improve her craft. Marilyn is a legend in today's time, primarily because of her status as a sex symbol. It's easy to look at pictures of her and admire her for her looks, but it simplifies a woman who was a very complicated person and who was also talented. So on our next slide, we're going to take a look at some of those things that she was able to accomplish throughout her life and after. So one of the issues that Marilyn took very seriously and was very poignant at that time was civil rights. And a famous woman, jazz singer, Ella Fitzgerald, says, I owe Marilyn Monroe a real debt. She personally called the owner of the Mocambo nightclub and told him she wanted to be booked immediately. And if he would do it, she would take a front table every night. She told him, and it was true, due to Marilyn's superstar status, that the press would go wild. So she continues, the owner said yes, and Marilyn was therefore front table every night. The press went overboard. After that, Ella Fitzgerald says, I never had to play a small jazz club again. She was an unusual woman, a little ahead of her time, and she didn't know it. So during her career and after, her popular cultural connections are multifold. Advertising, everything from Coca-Cola. One of her biggest paying jobs was for a perfume company called Chanel. She was involved with architecture. She and one of her husbands hired Frank Lloyd Wright, famous American architect, to design their home. He didn't get the contract. However, he kept his original design, and he worked on it years later. And from that design was built a hotel in Hawaii. She was all over art, from Andy Warhol to Lichtenstein's comics. Her pictures graced the living rooms of famous designers of today. Again, connecting to that interior decorating, architectural style. She was in editorial cartoons, of course, fashion, film career, even made it to today, graphic novels, along with Batman and some of the superheroes. Has been written about and mentioned in many famous literary works. Has been the subject of songs. Has been kind of an add-in background piece in many contemporary music videos. They even made an opera about her. Of course, her photography, pictures for magazines, advertising, just her own talents. Written about in poetry, radio programming, of course, television, the theater, and she is even a character in video games. So Marilyn was successful in her career while she was alive, and she's still celebrated today, more than 50 years later. So that's kind of a little background to our reading on Marilyn Monroe and her connection to American popular culture. Okay, so our next few slides, we're going to go back and finish up a lesson that we had in our Lit 4 class about regional parts of America. And we talked about Yankeedom, New Netherlands, the left coast, and First Nations in our previous class. So we're going to go back and we're going to start from Yankeedom, New Netherlands, moving south, and cover the other parts of regional America. Our focus before was on literature, which is part of popular culture, American culture. And we're going to talk a little bit more this time focusing on contemporary popular culture items for those areas that we didn't talk about before. So just south of Yankeedom and New Netherlands, we run into the beginnings of the Midlands. We would call that traditionally the Midwest. And it starts in northern New Jersey and goes west from there. So they are kind of opposed to government regulation, which is very different than Yankeedom. The first settlers were English and Quakers, which is a kind of Protestant religion, coming more so from the Netherlands. And the Midlands are a welcoming middle-class society that spawned the cultures of the American heartland. Political opinion is usually moderate, and government regulations are frowned upon. Author Woodward calls the ethnically diverse Midlands America's great swing region. Within the Midlands are parts of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, and Nebraska. So one very unique group, mostly in Pennsylvania, they are called the Amish. And they immigrated to America in the early to mid 1700s, predominantly from Germany and Switzerland, a Protestant religious group. They are focused on kind of keeping those traditional values from the past and live a simple life. They shun kind of modern conveniences. When they're baptized, they're usually not baptized until up until 18 to like 24. So, of course, the kids are brought up in the Amish community. They have their own schools. And about the age of 18, their parents encourage them to leave the community and to go see the outside world, kind of as a way to test their upbringing and religious values, but also to see if they really want to be part of the Amish community. It is quite a sacrifice for them to continue their traditions. And if it's not for them, they are welcome to stay outside the community. However, most of those kids, they do go out, they smoke and drink and do all the things college kids do, but they they come back and become adults within their boundaries and community. They have some unusual dress. They dress very simple, kind of dark colors. I think they have to wear buttons. I think zippers are too much of a modern convenience. They kind of shun away from that. No cell phones, no computers, no cars. Some of them use a tractor in the farm fields, but some don't even use a tractor for farming. They use the old horse and plow. They grow a long beard, but no mustache, because the mustache is considered a military style, and they're against the military. They don't serve in any armies. They don't believe in any kind of warfare or fighting. You see them in these rural communities, not in cars, but in horse and drawn carriages from the 1800s. They have to get a special license and license plates and put safety lights on those carriages, but they are seen throughout those Amish communities, again, predominantly in Pennsylvania. Okay, so part of our Midwest area, a couple of one famous author we all know grew up there, and his name was Samuel Clemens, but we know him as Mark Twain. He was born and raised in the state of Missouri, and he grew up along the Mississippi River in a small town called Hannibal, in the same area where our fictional character Tom Sawyer grows up. So in a lot of ways, Tom Sawyer is connected to Mark Twain's own life growing up on the Mississippi River. Now, Mark Twain is his pen name, and that actually comes from being on a steamboat on the Mississippi River. And what it is a marker for the depth of the water. And they need to measure the depth of the water because they don't want their steamships to hit the bottom of the river and get stuck there. So that measuring rope, the person that was measuring the water would call out the depth, but not in feet per se. Each 10-foot marking had a special name. And Mark Twain meant 20-foot depth of water, which was the safety depth to bring the steamboat up the river. So that's where Samuel Clemens gets his pen name, Mark Twain. And Samuel Clemens was a kind of a learning to be a pilot on a steamboat on the Mississippi River. And he lasted at the job for about 2 years. And he did go up and down the Mississippi River. All of those stories that he writes about and steamboats and all of that sort of thing were all part of his life. And icons today, they still have special vacations that people will travel up and down the Mississippi River on those old steamboats. But those steamboats back then were very dangerous. So he was kind of learning to be a pilot. He quits the job. He finds a job on the boat for his cousin. And his cousin kind of takes over his place on the boat. So he leaves. About a year later, the steam engine on the boat that he was piloting, the person that was supposed to take care of the engine, there's a lot of pressure in those engines with the steam. He was chasing some girl, not paying attention, and the steam engine exploded. There were 420 passengers on board that ship. Half of them perished in that accident, including his cousin. So we never know what would have happened to Mark Twain if he had stayed in that job. So, of course, back then, kids growing up on the Mississippi River, that was what they wanted to be. Like kids today want to be a famous basketball star or baseball star or a pop singer. Well, back then, you wanted to be a steamboat captain. Okay, so steamboats were kind of the pop culture icon of that day. And this connects to somebody we know as a cultural icon cartoonist named Walt Disney. And Walt Disney's first cartoon was Mickey Mouse. And in that first cartoon, Mickey Mouse is a steamboat wannabe captain. And we've got a little video clip showing that. Walt Disney's introduction to the cartoon world through Mickey Mouse. It's called Steamboat Willie. And we'll take a look at that. Also, we have another short video clip of the famous scene from Tom Sawyer, where he gets in trouble with his aunt and he has to go and paint the picket fence outside the house. And he convinces all his friends that this is even better than going swimming at the old swimming hole. So we have a little video clip about that story. Everybody knows that one. Okay, so one of the major commercial enterprises and products from our Midwest area is Budweiser beer. And their iconic symbol is these huge horses called a Clydesdale. And you see them on their television commercials. Now, the Clydesdale horse is a gentle giant, but it's huge. And the story goes is that, okay, so America makes alcohol illegal. Didn't last very long. And nobody paid attention to the law anyway. So Prohibition is made legal again. And as a celebration, Budweiser Beer Company filled up a wagon full of beer kegs. One in St. Louis, one in Boston, one in New York, to celebrate the end of no alcohol allowed. So they parade down the streets in these wagons that are pulled by the Clydesdale horse. The Clydesdale horse actually comes from Scotland, and it was used as a farming animal. But that's become the icon for Budweiser beer company. So a couple of facts about Budweiser. They spend almost $450 million a year on advertising in the USA alone. It's sold worldwide. Was established in St. Louis, Missouri in 1876. And it is one of the major advertisers for something called NASCAR. It's a huge, probably the biggest sport in America. Also, they spend huge amounts of money on advertising for the NFL, the National Football League. And recently they got a spot selling for FIFA Soccer World Cup Championship. So it's considered the world's #1 beer in international sales. Actually, the beer that sells the most is a beer called Snow in China, but you can only buy it in China. So, okay, so after it was called Prohibition, when you were prohibited from drinking, Budweiser kind of got its name because things were not regulated back then, safety-wise, health-wise, but Budweiser offered something that was a quality beer, although mediocre at best, but it was safe for consumption. Basically, the consumers knew that it was reliable because of the name brand. They were one of the first to have a refrigerated distribution. So that's how they really became popular. People knew the name and they knew it was safe to drink and they weren't going to get sick on it. So it became popular that way there. Let's see. The advertisements that they do for the National Football League Super Bowl. I mean, companies spend millions and millions of dollars to advertise during that game time. Their commercial advertisements have won awards for years. And we have a short video clip example of that. Okay, so also in the Midwest area was the beginnings of American football. In November in 1869, players from Princeton University and Rutgers University held their first intercollegiate football contest in New Jersey, playing a soccer-style game with rules adapted from the London Football Association. And that became the rough beginnings of American football. There is a famous, iconic painting that's used to describe the Midwest, and it's called American Gothic. And it shows a farmer and his daughter. The farmer's holding a pitchfork, and their farmhouse is in the background. It's a very simple painting, painted in 1930 by Grant Wood, and it's in the collection at the Art Institute of Chicago. It's a famous, a very simple American art piece that has been used in popular culture everywhere from Andy Warhol's interpretation to commercials and advertising, TV backdrop. Parodies have been made of it, and we have a picture of that on our screen below. So the painting is actually named for the style of architecture in the house in the background, and that's called American Gothic. And it was located in Iowa, and it kind of shows kind of the kind of people that you think would live in that house. And again, it's the farmer. He's standing beside his daughter, but most people think it's, or assume that it was his wife. Something else from the area is called, musically, is called Heartland Rock. This is a genre that is associated with the working class of the Midwest and the Rust Belt. It is also includes urban back streets and rooftops. And its major themes are about alienation, despair, unemployment, small town decline, disillusionment, limited opportunity, and a kind of bitter nostalgia. A couple of the famous musicians that are within this genre would be Bruce Springsteen, who's born in USA, John Fogerty, Steve Miller Band, John Mellencamp, Bruce Hornsby, Leon Russell, and Melissa Etheridge. These are all artists associated with that genre. A kind of comical group called the Blues Brothers kind of bring that Midwestern blues to the screen with John Belushi. A couple of odd things here. Mustaches are kind of part of the culture there. For some reason, mustaches are kind of seen everywhere in the Midwest. It's almost an essential accessory to have as a man, is to grow a mustache. Hockey is really big. They have a lot of lakes in the area. Very brutal winter times, so kids get a chance to play hockey, and they've won several big successes, especially in college hockey titles. A movie that kind of depicts this area is called Field of Dreams. I think it's a Kevin Costner film. And it's about this guy who has a dream to make a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, which he does. And actually people come and watch games there. And he's successful in that dream. He has a dream to do that. Also, the Pro Football Hall of Fame is there in Canton, Ohio, although not as famous as Cooperstown. There is a major automobile race that's held every year. It's called the Indianapolis 500 or the Indy 500. It has a stadium that can hold 400,000 people. It has this huge parade and celebration. It's I think it's Memorial Day. They run the race, and all the big names in racing enter that race. It's kind of a big deal. I remember as a kid, my dad would have the radio on, listening to that Indianapolis 500 race every year. Let's see, what else? The Green Bay Packers football team from Wisconsin. Wisconsin is famous for its cheese. And there are like 130 cheese plants in the state. So what the Green Bay Packers fans do is they have a hat that looks like a piece of cheese that they wear to the football games. So they're known as the Cheeseheads. Kind of a comical deal. Notre Dame University, famous All-American Knute Rockne played for them. Movies have been made about this university and their football team. And in one of the movies, the former president, Ronald Reagan, plays one of the major leads, George Gipp, in a 1940s film about the football coach, Knute Rockne. Okay, so that kind of sums up our slide on the Midlands, and we'll move on to our next slide from here. Okay, so our next regional area, very small, is called Tidewater. And it's the area in and surrounding Washington, D.C. So this area was built by young English gentry in the area around the Chesapeake Bay and North Carolina. And it's started out as a kind of a feudal society that embraced slavery. So the region places a high value on respect for authority and tradition. Our author Woodward notes that Tidewater is in decline partly because it has been eaten away by the expanding federal halos around Washington, D.C. and Norfolk, Virginia. So Norfolk, Virginia is a huge military naval base that is forever expanding. D.C. has its own native music genre. It's called go-go. It's a post-funk percussion-driven flavor of R&B with some Latin beat to it. Got a quick video on that. Washington, D.C. is very diverse and therefore sees plenty of different cultural highlights, with most revolving around the arts. Live music and dance is big in the city, and although go-go performances were once banned, it is still possible to catch an act in a jazz club. Live jazz and blues can be heard everywhere, thanks to Duke Ellington, who performed in many of the clubs in the early days in Washington, D.C. Of course, D.C. is a national center for the arts, famed for its numerous art galleries, museums, theaters. Today, the city has a strong indie music that started in the 80s with punk. It is also a major center for sports, hosting big professional teams such as the NBA's Washington Wizards, the National Hockey League's Washington Capitals, and the National Football League's Washington Redskins. By the way, they're thinking of changing the name, which they probably should. There have been several television series that have featured the Washington, D.C. district. Most of these have been related to government, such as West Wing, Commander-in-Chief, House of Cards, or maybe security organizations. Get Smart was kind of a spoof on CIA. The District, Murphy Brown, another TV series focused on the lives of reporters of a fictional Washington-based television news magazine, FYI. A soap opera called Capital allowed for stories about political intrigue, along with traditional class struggle sagas. The sitcom 227 portrayed the life of the African American majority as seen through the eyes of residents in a Washington apartment building. There are also many movies shot and filmed in the city yearly. The district has been host to several movies where the main characters are often linked to politics. Wedding Crashers, Being There, Hollow Man, National Treasure. The Washington Post is the oldest and most daily read newspaper in Washington, and it has developed into one of the most reputable daily newspapers in the U.S. It is most notable for exposing the Watergate scandal, among other achievements. So, around the Washington, D.C. area, if you ever have a chance to visit, Washington is a must-go-to place. All of the beautiful architecture, museums, statues, monuments, they're all within a walking area of the capital area. Some of the greatest restaurants in the world are right in that area there. There's a nice waterfront area within a walking distance. But surrounding this beautiful, luxurious, affluent area is all surrounded on the outskirts by poverty. Kind of a contradiction in terms. And why that is and why that should continue, that's a big question. Okay, so that's a little bit about Tidewater, and we'll move on to our next slide from here. Okay, so our next area is called Appalachia, and it was colonized by settlers from war-ravaged borderlands of Northern Ireland, Northern England, and the Scottish lowlands. Greater Appalachia is stereotyped as the land of hillbillies and rednecks. Our author, Woodward, says Appalachia values personal sovereignty and individual liberty and is intensely suspicious of lowland aristocrats and Yankee social engineers alike. It sides with the Deep South to counter the influence of federal government. Within Greater Appalachia are parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Indiana, Illinois, and northern Texas. So one of the big industries in Appalachia is coal mining. And that's a dwindling enterprise as we speak. However, it was really important in the American Industrial Revolution, providing power and energy for factories. Very difficult and dangerous job. We have a song that kind of depicts the life of a coal miner. They still exist today, but certainly not in the numbers that it once was. And most of the coal miners in this area are from generations of coal miners. Their father was a coal miner, their grandfather was a coal miner, and so on down the line. It pays well. It is dangerous, but it is not full-time. It's not like you go to work 52 weeks a year. You're lucky to get 26 weeks a year of full-time work. So at the end of the day, they don't make a lot of money per year. Moonshine is a term that's used throughout the area, and that is illegal whiskey. It's still prevalent today, but not as much as it was during Prohibition. And the funny story is okay, so they would make the illegal moonshine whiskey in the backwoods of Appalachia. But they had to get it from the backwoods to the distributors, the illegal distributors, who went and sold it. So what they would do is they would take their cars, the old cars of the 20s and 30s, and then muscle them up and put big engines in them and fake places to hide the whiskey, extra trunk space, extra shocks to make it so that it didn't look like the car was being heavily loaded down with illegal whiskey. It was all back roads then, dirt roads. And so they'd pack up these refitted cars, muscle cars, to go super fast so that the police, if they did find them, number one, and number two, if they did chase them, that they could outrun the local police cars and get away. So this, in a strange way, eventually became what we know today as NASCAR racing. And in the early days, some of those moonshine drivers were the first drivers in the NASCAR racing events when it first started out. So quite a history, lots of folklore, lots of stories about illegal moonshine and being chased by the police and the FBI and all of that sort of thing. And it still goes on today, but certainly nowhere near what it was like back during Prohibition. Another cultural icon of the area is the world's most famous horse race, and that's called the Kentucky Derby. Got a short little video clip on that. This is considered the most intense 2 minutes of any sport event in the world. A lot of money, a lot of bets, big parties. Women wear funny-looking hats, and it's a huge celebration that's celebrated. I think it's in May. I think it's in May. the Kentucky Derby. So it's kind of the first class horse or rider that wins this event, makes big money. The owners make huge profits. Those horses can sell for as much as $2 million that enter into this race. So Kentucky Derby should be on anyone's list for their bucket list to go and see. Also within this area, another kind of infamous couple, Bonnie and Clyde, bank robbers. This was part of their area that they robbed banks and gas stations and led their life of crime for a short spurt, being eventually killed by the FBI in a shootout in, I think, Louisiana. So, Greater Appalachia is a very interesting place. A lot of poverty, even still today. However, it has become more and more diverse area. A lot of immigrants in this area. Up and coming areas in North Carolina. It's kind of the secondary technology belt, surrounded by 3 universities. So it's growing. Land is relatively inexpensive. Housing is relatively inexpensive. So it's coming into its own, and it's certainly not the backwoods character that it had in the past. It's an up-and-coming, affluent place for the future. Okay, so our next regional area is called the Deep South. And our author, Woodward, notes the Deep South was established by English slave lords from Barbados. And Barbados is a Caribbean island controlled by the British. It was one of those sugarcane producing islands, part of the triangular trade between slaves from Africa taken to the Caribbean to work the sugarcane plantations. That was eventually made into a sweetener called molasses that was sent throughout the other British colonies in America, then traded for lumber, furs, other natural resources that were sent back to England. Okay, so the states that are part of what is known as the Deep South include Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, and they're all part of what's called the Deep South. There is a distinct regional accent of people from the Deep South. It comes from part of England that sent its early colonists, and they kind of kept that regional accent from England up to the present day. In the same way that Yankeedom has its own distinct regional accent from English peoples from other parts of England that settled in the northern states. Again, having its own distinct regional dialect that has been kept in part even up to today. Okay, so the Southern culture has been and remains generally more socially conservative than the rest of the country. Because of the central role of agriculture and slavery in the pre-Civil War economy, society kind of remained stratified according to land ownership, and communities often developed strong attachment to their churches as a primary community institution. So the regional popular culture, one thing should be noted that stands out in the South as compared to other parts, regional parts of America, is called Southern hospitality. And this is from an article from Southern Living, a magazine that caters to the population of the South. And it's interesting to note, too, that in the United States, there are these specific regional magazines that cater to regional population. For Yankeedom, it's a magazine called Yankee Magazine. Comes out of Maine. And it captures the essence of the New England states. Southern Living is that counterpart magazine that caters to people living in the South. It includes things like what's the fashion, who the popular celebrities are, following them in their pursuits in film or music, cuisine, recipes, cultural events, and so forth. So Southern Living has this to say about the Southern hospitality. Is a phrase used in American English to describe the stereotype of residents of Southern United States, in particular, warm, sweet, and welcoming to visitors to their homes or to the South in general. There are 6 qualities that really define Southern hospitality. Because Southern hospitality isn't just a catchphrase, it's a way of life below the Mason-Dixon line. So the Mason-Dixon line is this line south of Washington, D.C. And it really was used as a defining geographical line. States to the north of that line didn't have slaves. States to the south of that line had slaves. So that became known as the Mason-Dixon line. Okay, so this article was written by Michelle Darasaw, and she writes about Southern hospitality. So she says, growing up in a small town in Georgia, so small, even finding it on the map is a challenge, I was raised to believe that hospitality isn't a choice. It's more of an institution in my household, where we abide by Southern rituals and customs beyond swinging on the front porch, sipping on sweet tea, and gathering together on Sunday for a sit-down potluck supper. All three of those, sitting on the porch, sweet tea, potluck suppers, all part of Southern culture. While most would define Southern hospitality as being neighborly and welcoming friends, family, and yes, even strangers into our homes, the catch-all term comes with many definitions. In fact, one survey conducted by Tweedy narrowed down to 6 definitive qualities, with politeness and down-home cooking topping the list. Here we explored those 6 primary characteristics of Southern hospitality that are as consistent as our famously hot summers. 1. Politeness. Despite what society says, there is still a place for manners in the South. Before most children are taught how to spell or how to count, they learn these few magic words. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. Please, and thank you. The idea is that if we're taught at a young age how to be polite, it'll carry us through the rest of our lives as adults. And because we love company, and admittedly talking, conversations with loved ones and guests are never rushed. The motto in the South is, "What's the hurry?" And that is certainly reflected in the way and pace in which we speak and engage with other people. Totally different than, let's say, New York, Boston, Chicago. Everybody's in a hurry. Let's get it done. Move on. Don't waste time. The South, absolutely the antithesis of that. Okay, good home cooking. Entertaining and delicious food go hand in hand in the South. Every Southern woman knows how to whip up a warm peach cobbler or a classic hummingbird cake. We make no apologies for loving our tub of lard and embracing tradition in the kitchen, often preparing time-tested recipes passed down through generations. Our thinking in the South is that one dish is never enough because you never know when you'll have unexpected guests or relatives for dinner. You can rest assured a slow cooker or a cast iron skillet is almost always involved in cooking comforting and soul-satisfying food, emblematic of the South. Kindness. We treat our guests like their family in the South. As the saying goes, there are no strangers, just friends we haven't met yet. And we extend this kindness to everyone, forming lifelong connections and opening our homes and hearts. The most powerful gesture of kindness in the South is often a simple handshake where a good, firm grip still goes a long way here. Yeah, and it's true. Men especially judge other men by their handshake in the United States in general, and more specifically in the South. Helpfulness. You can forget about fixing your own plate or helping with the dishes as a guest in a Southern home. We take pride in preparing a home-cooked meal, serving company, and cleaning up once we hang up our guests' hats. We're gracious enough to lend a hand to our neighbor, and we're always willing to offer directions if you're lost on some old back road. That is, if you don't mind hearing a few stories or settling for navigation guided by town landmarks. Charm. What some deem as charming is just the natural Southern way of being kind, witty, and considerate to everyone we encounter, whether it be at the post office, grocery store, or at church. Having grace under pressure and making others feel welcome and comfortable is also part of the Southern charm. Yes, we take our pleasantries very seriously in the South, and we hate saying goodbye to guests that come over. But eventually, we're willing to wave them off like a polite host should, with the colloquial promise of, "Y'all come back now, you hear?" So true. It is so true. Going into a shop or the supermarket, don't be surprised if total strangers strike up a conversation with you. Charity. The golden rule in the South is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, without expecting reciprocation. Southerners don't give or dole out favors as an obligation, but we do it out of courtesy, respect, and mere habit, in hopes that you'll return again and again. Okay, so that's kind of our 6 points of Southern hospitality. It really is true. And we're going to talk about a movie called Gone with the Wind in just a minute, that really exemplifies those Southern cultural friendliness and politeness. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about cuisine, a couple of things that were kind of mentioned in that article. So one of the more popular drinks in the South is iced tea. And it's called sweet iced tea, and it's really sweet. So iced tea is commonly associated with the South, specifically sweet tea or brewed iced tea sweetened with granulated sugar has traditionally been served in the South. Another is peach cobbler. Today, peach cobbler is a traditional dessert served in the deep South, usually accompanied by a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Georgia, the state of Georgia's nickname is the Peach State because of its reputation for producing the highest quality peach. Georgia-grown peaches are recognized for their superior flavor, texture, appearance, and nutritional quality. Another thing that was mentioned was called hummingbird cake, and it's a banana pineapple spice cake common in southern United States. By the way, pineapple does not come from the South, but in fact comes from Hawaii. Another part of Southern cuisine, an alcoholic drink called the mint julep. It is the official drink of the Kentucky Derby, but a mint julep is a mixture consisting of bourbon, which is a kind of whiskey, sugar, water, crushed or shaved ice, and fresh mint, an herb called mint. It's associated with American South and the cuisine of southern United States. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some movies that kind of exemplify the South. And that movie is called Gone with the Wind. It was produced back in 1939. And it's a American epic historical romance film adapted from a book written in 1936, a novel by Margaret Mitchell. And it's set in the American South against the backdrop of the American Civil War and Reconstruction era. And the film tells the story of Scarlett O'Hara, a strong-willed daughter of a Georgia plantation owner. And it follows her romantic pursuit of Ashley Wilkes, who is married to his cousin, Marlene Hamilton, and her subsequent marriage to Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable. The leading role, Scarlett O'Hara, was played by Vivian Leigh, and Olivia de Havilland played Melanie. Gone with the Wind was immensely popular when it was first released. It became the highest earning film made up to that time and held the record for a quarter of a century. When adjusted for monetary inflation, it is still the highest grossing film in history. So the movie follows the book. The book is about that thick. It's huge. But it's an American classic movie. It really shows what the South was like in costume, in etiquette, in tradition, plantation life. So if you have a chance to rent or view that movie, really gives you the flavor of what the traditional South was like before and after the Civil War. A kind of a comical movie that really shows the South in more contemporary times is a movie called My Cousin Vinnie. And it's about two college kids from New York City. They just graduated from high school. They got accepted to college in UCLA. And they're going to drive out from New York City across the country to college in California. And they decide to take the southern route. So they're driving through Alabama in their metallic mint green 1964 Buick Skylark convertible. Bill Gambini and Stan Rothenstein, college students from New York who just got scholarships to UCLA, stop at a Sack of Suds, which is the name of a convenience store, and accidentally shoplift or steal a can of tuna fish. After they leave, the store clerk is robbed and killed, and Bill and Stan are arrested for murder. They call home. The family has one of the cousins who is a lawyer, and he decides to go down to Alabama to defend them on their murder charges. Now, the cousin lawyer, Vinnie, brings his girlfriend with him. And they are totally out of place. New York City people, dress, style, speech, manner, totally lost in Alabama. Now, Vinnie is a lawyer, but it took him many, many, many times to pass the lawyer exam. And he has only been practicing law in accident and insurance cases. And now he's going to defend his cousin on a murder charge. And the movie is absolutely hilarious. Though the film is set in Alabama, the production actually was shot in 3 separate small towns in Georgia. Apart from the courtroom, which was just a set that they built, virtually everything was shot on location. It wasn't a very expensive movie, and that was the cheaper way to go. It was also more authentic, which means you can visit a number of the film's locations, including the Sack-O-Suds convenience store. Now, I got to warn you, the language in the movie is quite descriptive. A lot of adjectives that you probably wouldn't want your grandmother to hear. Nevertheless, My Cousin Vinnie movie was actually praised by the law community. The movie was close to reality in its details. Lawyer Maxwell S. Kernley wrote on his blog, "Trial and litigation." Part of why the film has such staying power among lawyers is because, unlike, say, A Few Good Men, everything that happens in the movie could happen and often does happen at trial. Professor Alberto Barnaby of the John Marshall Law School, who hands his students a list of law movies organized by category, puts My Cousin Vinnie under the category of education. Not just because it provides so much material you can use in the classroom. For example, you can use the movie to discuss criminal procedure, courtroom decorum, professional responsibility, unethical behavior, the role of the judge in a trial, efficient cross-examining, the role of expert witnesses, and effective trial advocacy. So the movie is even used in college law classrooms as an example of what to do or what not to do, or the peculiar parts of what a trial is all about. So if you ever have a chance to see the movie My Cousin Vinnie, be prepared for the language, but it is absolutely hilarious and a good learning model of what, number one, what the South is like in contrast to, let's say, somebody from New York City, but also the procedure of a trial in law. Okay, so the next category about the Deep South is music. And, excuse me, country music has its roots and originated in southern United States as early as 1920. Now, the list of country singers goes on and on and on, And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because it's really been, the genre's really been combined into what's called country and western. And they are different, and yet they are similar as well. So we'll spend a little bit more time on country and western music when we get to the western states. But for today, I just want to talk about one singer in particular, and her name is Dolly Parton. And Dolly Parton has been famous in country music. She's from Tennessee, and she is not only a singer but a songwriter, and she's doing absolutely great work in philanthropy as well. Now, she wrote a song called Jolene, and she sings it, and she made it popular. But her goddaughter, Dolly Parton, is the godmother to another famous younger American singer, Miley Cyrus. And Miley Cyrus, although she's quirky and weird and strange and bizarre, actually does a great rendition of Dolly Parton's Jolene. And we have a quick music video on that. So share that with you. A couple of other things about the South. We're really kind of running out of time here, so I'll have to cut this short. College football is huge in the southern states. NASCAR racing, as we said before, NASCAR racing is the #1 sport in America. Huge in the southern states. Something in fashion is called seersucker. And it's a kind of special cotton. It comes from India. Very lightweight. The British used to wear it for the hot, humid temperature of India when they were over there causing trouble. And it made its way to the United States and has become a standard fashion in the southern states because the southern states are so humid in the summertime. So let's see. Okay, so that kind of sums up our little introduction to the region of the Deep South. And you have a reading to do for next week and a commentary on today's video. So we'll continue on with our and finish up our regional areas of the United States we haven't covered yet next week. So that's it for this video for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.